The Dominion had ruled the universe for 11,000 years. They moved from galaxy to galaxy like a disease, killing everything they touched. 17 galaxies had fallen to their ships. Trillions of living beings had died under their weapons. They did not want land or gold or slaves. They wanted something simpler and more terrible. They wanted to be the only ones left alive at the end of time. When their armada came to the edge of the Milky Way, they expected an easy victory. They had seen 1,000 species before. All of them had fallen. All of them had begged. All of them had died. Earth fell in 3 days. The great cities burned. The oceans boiled under orbital strikes. Billions of humans died in fire and darkness. They did not celebrate. To them, this was not a victory. It was just another step in their endless march toward a silent universe. Captain stood on the bridge of the last human battlecruiser and watched her die. She was 34 years old. She had been born in a beautiful city by the sea that no longer existed. She had trained in the orbital academies above Mars, learning to fight in a war that everyone said would never come. Now that war was over, humanity had lost. Through the viewport, she could see the fleet. 14,000 ships hung in the darkness like a wall of death. Each one was the size of a mountain. Each one carried enough weapons to destroy a moon. Against them, humanity had almost nothing left. Turned to her tactical officer was a thin man with tired eyes and quick hands. He had been awake for 40 hours, tracking the enemy, calculating odds that grew worse with every passing minute. "How many ships do we have left?" asked. Her voice was calm. She had learned long ago that a captain must never show fear, even when fear was the only reasonable response. Pulled up the data on his screen. His fingers were shaking, but his voice was steady. 7 frigates, 2 destroyers. He is the only battlecruiser still working. Everything else is gone. 10 ships, said quietly. 10 ships against 14,000. Yes, Captain. The bridge was silent. Everyone had heard the numbers. Everyone understood what they meant. Chief Engineer Bora stepped forward from her station. She was a short woman with strong arms and a face that was always smudged with grease or coolant or both. She had kept the running through 3 battles already, performing miracles with broken parts and desperate prayers. Captain, Bora said, "We cannot win this fight. You know this. We should run, hide, wait for a better chance." "Where would we hide?" asked. "The underground colonies on Titan. We'll find them eventually. They always do. They have 11,000 years of practice at hunting down survivors." "Then what do you suggest? That we die for nothing?" Turned to face her crew. There were 47 of them on the bridge and in the sections below. 47 people who had chosen to stay when the evacuation orders came. They could have run. They could have hidden in the deep tunnels beneath the ice moons. They could have hoped that they would somehow miss them. Instead, they had stayed. Looked at each of them in turn. She saw fear in their eyes, yes, but she also saw something else, something harder, something that refused to break. "We are not going to win," she said. "I will not lie to you about that. The mathematics are clear. 10 ships cannot defeat 14,000, but mathematics is not everything." She walked to the center of the bridge, where everyone could see her clearly. "They have conquered 17 galaxies. They have killed more living beings than we can count. And in all that time, in all those thousands of years, no one has ever made them truly afraid. No one has ever hurt them badly enough to make them hesitate." His eyes were bright with something that might have been tears or might have been fire. "We cannot change what happens to Earth. We cannot save our families or our cities or our world. That chance is gone. But we can do something that no species has ever done before. We can make them remember us. We can hurt them so badly that they will tell stories about this day for the next 11,000 years." The silence on the bridge was complete. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then, the young pilot who had graduated from the academy only 6 months ago raised his hand. He was barely 22 years old. He had a round face and eyes that still held some innocence despite everything he had seen. Captain said, "How do we do that? How do we hurt something that big?" Smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had already accepted death and found a strange peace in that acceptance. Lieutenant has been studying ships for 6 years. He knows their weaknesses better than anyone alive. Bora has been working on a weapon that might actually damage their flagships. And you are the best pilot I have ever seen. They have never faced humans before. They do not know what we can do. They do not know how we think. She opened a communication channel to the other surviving ships. 9 small vessels, scattered across the darkness, each one crewed by people who had made the same choice as this crew. All ships, this is Captain. I am not going to order you to fight. What I am going to ask of you is something that no captain should ever ask. I am asking you to die. Not for victory, because victory is impossible. I am asking you to die so that something of humanity survives in the memory of our enemies. The channel was quiet for a long moment. Then a voice crackled through the speakers. It was Captain of the frigate. "Captain, my crew and I have discussed this. We stayed because we believe that some things are worth more than survival. We still believe that. They will follow you." One by one, the other ships reported in. The ships named for mountains and islands and sacred places that no longer existed. 9 captains, 9 crews, all choosing to stand beside the. Leaned close to and spoke quietly. "Captain, I have analyzed the formation. Their communication network has a weakness. If we can hit the right targets at the right time, we can blind them, make them fight without coordination." How long would that blindness last? Minutes, maybe less. And in those minutes, his tired eyes met hers. In those minutes, anything is possible. Nodded, she turned back to the viewport, looking at the vast wall of enemy ships. Somewhere among them was the flagship of the Supreme Commander, the creature called the Render. He had destroyed 63 civilizations personally. He had never known defeat. Today thought he will learn something new. "All ships," she said into the communication channel, "form up on the. We attack in 30 minutes. She sat down in her captain's chair and closed her eyes. In her mind she saw as it had been in her childhood, the sea, the bridges, the lights at night reflecting on the water, all gone now, all ashes. But not forgotten. Never forgotten. The engines powered up. Across the darkness, 9 other ships did the same, 10 small lights against an endless night. The last stand of humanity was about to begin. The Supreme Commander stood in the center of his flagship and watched the human ships approach. He was a massive creature, 3 meters tall, covered in plates of black bone that gleamed like polished stone. His eyes burned with a cold red light that had watched civilizations die. His subordinates called him the Render, because he had rendered 63 species into nothing but ash and memory. "They attack," his lieutenant said. The lieutenant's voice held confusion. 10 vessels against 14,000. This is not strategy. This is madness. The Render made a sound that might have been laughter. In 11,000 years, he had seen many things. He had seen species surrender instantly, begging for mercy that would never come. He had seen species fight with everything they had, only to be crushed in hours. He had seen species try to run, to hide, to bargain. He had never seen 10 ships charge directly at 14,000. "Let them come," the Render commanded. "Record everything. We will show this footage to the other conquered species. Let them see what happens to those who resist the Dominion." Across the void, the human ships accelerated. Captain gripped the arms of her chair as the shook with the force of its engines. The inertial dampeners were struggling to compensate. Warning lights flickered across every console. "All ships begin scatter pattern," she ordered. "Do not fly in formation. Do not fly in straight lines. Make them work for every shot." The opened fire. Energy beams the color of dying stars cut through the darkness. Each beam carried enough power to vaporize a small moon. The targeting systems were the most advanced in 17 galaxies, capable of tracking and destroying anything that moved. They hit nothing. Had spent 6 years studying weapons. He had analyzed fragments from 100 fallen worlds. He had learned how their targeting systems thought, how they predicted enemy movement, how they calculated firing solutions. And he had programmed the human ships to do exactly what those systems said was impossible. "Hard turn, Vector 37, shouted. His hands flew across the controls. The twisted sideways, missing a beam that would have cut it in half. Another beam passed so close that could see its light through the viewport, bright enough to blind. Around them, the other human ships danced through the storm. They did not fly like military vessels. They flew like leaves in a hurricane, spinning and tumbling and changing direction with no pattern that any computer could predict. They fired again and again. Their weapons filled the space between the fleets with deadly light, and still the human ships came on, weaving through gaps that should not have existed. "Their targeting systems are confused," reported, his voice tight with concentration. "They expect logical movement, they expect fear. They do not expect this." "What is this?" asked, pulling through another impossible turn. "This is spite," said. "This is rage. This is everything they have never understood about living beings." The frigate took a glancing hit. Its shields flickered and died, but it kept flying. Captain Menu's voice came through the communication channel, calm despite the damage to his ship. "I have lost main shields, requesting new target assignment." "Move to Sector 7, ordered. There is a communication relay station there. Destroy it." "Understood, moving to Sector 7. The formation was vast, but it was not built for this kind of fight. Their ships were designed to overwhelm enemies with superior firepower. They were not designed to chase small, fast vessels that refused to follow any predictable pattern. Had identified the key weakness, the communication network. They had been winning for so long that they had grown lazy about coordination. Their ships relied on a central network to share targeting data and battle orders. Without that network, 14,000 ships became 14,000 separate problems. "Approaching primary hub," Captain reported. His frigate was smaller than they, faster and more maneuverable. It had already dodged 17 killing shots on its run toward the center of the formation. "Be careful," said. "That hub is heavily defended." "I know, Captain." His voice was steady. "We have made our calculations. They can reach the hub. Whether we survive the approach is a different question." The render was no longer amused. From his position on the flagship, he watched the tactical display with growing disbelief. The human ships were not dying. Worse, they were getting closer to targets that actually mattered. 3 of his secondary communication stations had already been damaged. "Concentrate fire on the lead ship," he ordered. "The large one, destroy it now." 500 vessels turned their weapons toward saw the change in the enemy formation. She saw the weapons charging, saw the targeting beams lock onto her ship. For a moment, she felt fear. Real, honest fear that made her hands cold and her heart pound. Then she pushed the fear away. There was no room for it now. She said calmly, "They are focusing on us. Use it." The young pilot understood immediately. He threw into a spiraling dive, drawing the enemy fire away from the other human ships. Beams flashed past on all sides. The ship shook as near misses heated the hull to dangerous levels. "All ships execute strike pattern," ordered. While they focused on the other human vessels attacked. They destroyed a weapons platform. They took out a sensor array. The small frigate, commanded by a woman named who had never expected to fight in a real battle, somehow managed to ram a cruiser and detonate her reactor inside its hangar bay. Its last transmission was simple, for Earth. The explosion took 17 enemy fighters with it. The render watched the destruction with something that felt uncomfortable. something he had not felt in thousands of years. It took him a moment to recognize it. He was afraid. Not of losing the battle. That was impossible. Even if the humans destroyed 100 ships, 1,000 ships, the Dominion would still win. The mathematics were absolute. But mathematics could not explain what he was seeing. These humans were dying, and they knew they were dying, and they attacked anyway. They attacked with a fury that seemed to grow stronger as their numbers shrank. They attacked as if death meant nothing to them. They had never faced an enemy like this. Captain's voice cut through the chaos. "The is in position. Primary communication hub is in range." Looked at the tactical display. She could see a tiny dot of light surrounded by enemy ships. It had taken damage during its run. Its shields were gone. Half its weapons were destroyed, but it had reached the target. Said, "Your orders were to destroy the hub. Can you do it?" A pause, then laughed, and there was joy in that laughter, the joy of a man who had found meaning in his final moments. "Captain, the hub is too heavily armored for our remaining weapons, but the still has a reactor, and reactors can be overloaded." Closed her eyes, she understood what was saying. "Are you certain?" she asked. "I am certain. My crew agrees. We will take this hub with us, and we will take every enemy ship within range." His voice softened. "Captain, it has been an honor. Tell them about us. Tell them we did not go quietly." "I will," promised. "I will tell everyone." They accelerated toward the communication hub. They tried to destroy it, but it was too close now, moving too fast. The little frigate hit the hub at full speed, and in the same moment its reactor detonated. The explosion was beautiful and terrible. 8 destroyers died in the blast. The primary communication hub shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. Across the fleet, screens went dark. Orders stopped coming. Ships that had been firing in perfect coordination suddenly found themselves alone and confused. "Now," said into the sudden silence, "all ships, hit them with everything we have." The impossible charge continued, and for the first time in 11,000 years, did not know how to respond. The battle had lasted 1 hour. In that hour the universe had changed. 6 human ships remained, then 5, then 4. Captain watched each light disappear from her tactical display. Each light was a ship. Each ship was a crew. Each crew was made of people who had families and dreams and fears, people who would never go home again. They died protecting from a flanking attack. Captain Menu's final words were a simple goodbye to his daughter, who was hiding somewhere in the tunnels beneath Titan. They went down fighting 3 enemy cruisers at once. It destroyed 2 of them before the 3rd tore it apart. The small frigate, commanded by a quiet man named who rarely spoke but always smiled, flew directly into the engine section of a carrier. The resulting explosion took the carrier and its 800 fighters with it. 3 ships now. The and the tiny escort vessel, which had no business being in a battle this large but had refused to run. "This is," Captain's voice came through the communication channel. She sounded tired, more than tired. She sounded like someone who had given everything she had and was searching for more to give. "I read you," replied. "What is your status?" "Weapons are at 30%. Shields are gone. We have fires on 4 decks and my engineer tells me the reactor is becoming unstable." Paused. "Captain, we cannot continue much longer." "I know. But before we go, I want to do something that matters, something they will remember." Looked at the tactical display. The fleet was in chaos. The destruction of their communication hub had left them unable to coordinate. Ships were firing at shadows. Formations were breaking apart. The render had lost control of his own fleet. But it would not last. Already they were adapting, finding new ways to communicate, reorganizing into smaller groups. In minutes, perhaps less, they would recover, and when they did, they would hunt down the remaining human ships with everything they had. Said, "There is a carrier 200 kilometers to your port side. It has a hangar bay full of fighters. If they launch, we are finished." "I see it." His voice was calm now, the calm of someone who had made a decision. "They can reach it. We cannot destroy it with weapons, but we can prevent those fighters from launching." "How?" "By giving them something else to worry about." Laughed, and it was a real laugh, full of warmth despite everything. "Captain, it has been an honor serving alongside you. When you survive this, and you will survive this, tell them about the... Tell them we did not run." "I will, I promise." The turn toward the carrier. Its engines flared with power it should not have had, burning fuel that should have been exhausted hours ago. The ship moved like a living thing, determined and unafraid. They tried to stop it. Energy beams cut through space around the, scorching its hull, tearing holes in its armor. The ship was dying, everyone could see that. Flames poured from breaches in its sides. Its lights flickered and went dark. But it kept moving. Captain's final transmission came through with blood in her voice and fire in her words. "Captain, make them remember us. Make them remember all of us." They flew into the carrier's hangar bay at full speed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then this reactor went critical. The explosion was massive. It consumed the carrier and everything inside it. 1,700 enemy fighters died before they could launch. The blast wave damaged 3 other ships nearby. The tactical display updated. The light was gone. Did not cry. There would be time for tears later if there was a later. Now she had work to do. "Bora," she said into the internal communication system, "how is the weapon?" In the engineering section of the, Chief Engineer Bora worked frantically. She was covered in burns and cuts from a dozen small accidents. She had not slept in 2 days. Around her, her team of engineers moved with desperate speed, assembling something that had never existed before. The resonance lance. For years, human scientists had studied the wreckage of ships. They had found something strange in the hull composition, a flaw, almost invisible, that made the metal vulnerable to a specific frequency of energy. No weapon had ever been built to exploit this flaw because no one had believed it would matter. They were too strong. Their fleets were too vast. What difference would one weapon make? But Bora had always believed in impossible things. She had designed the resonance lance in her spare time, working from stolen data and desperate hope. She had never expected to actually build it. Now she had no choice. "The weapon is almost ready," Bora reported. "But Captain, there is a problem." "Tell me." "To power the lance, we need everything. Every bit of energy that has. The reactor, the backup systems, the emergency reserves, all of it." Understood immediately. "If we fire the lance, we lose all power." "Yes, the ship will go dark. No engines, no shields, no life support except what we can generate manually. We will be dead in space, completely defenseless." The bridge was silent as the crew processed this information. They had fought for an hour against impossible odds. They had watched their friends die. They had destroyed more enemy ships than anyone would have thought possible. And now they were being asked to give up everything for one shot. One shot that might not even work. "Captain," said quietly, "Thee is asking for instructions. Captain wants to know the plan." Looked at the tactical display. The tiny escort vessel was barely visible among the debris and chaos of the battle. It had survived through luck and skill, and the simple fact that it was too small for them to consider a threat. "Tell Captain to stay back," ordered. "If this works, he needs to survive. Someone needs to tell the story. And if it does not work?" Met's eyes. "Then he runs, he hides, and he waits for a better chance." She stood up from her chair and looked at her crew. 17 people remained on the bridge. 17 out of the original 47. Each one had stayed when they could have run. Each one had fought when fighting seemed pointless. "I will not order anyone to stay," said. "The escape pods still function. If anyone wants to leave, I will not blame them. You have already given more than anyone could ask." Nobody moved. Spoke first. Captain, I have spent 6 years preparing for this moment. I am not going to miss it now. Bora's voice came through the communication system. Captain, my team and I are staying. This weapon is our work. We want to see it fire. Simply smiled and returned his attention to the controls. Someone needs to fly this ship, Captain, and I am the best pilot you have. One by one, the others nodded. At the communications station, the gunners at their weapons, the technicians at their monitors, 17 people who had already decided that some things were worth more than survival. Felt something break inside her heart, and something else grew to fill the space. Pride, love, the terrible, beautiful weight of leading people who were better than she deserved. Then let us show them what humans are made of, she said. Bora, finish the weapon. Plot a course for the enemy flagship. We are going to kill the render. The turn toward the heart of the fleet. Its crew prepared for one final act of defiance. And across the battlefield, the render watched them come with something that felt very much like fear. The render stood at the center of his bridge and felt something he had not felt in 3,000 years. Uncertainty. On his tactical display, a single human ship was approaching his flagship. It was damaged. It was burning. It was clearly dying. And yet it came on, pushing through the debris of battle, dodging the fire of his remaining coordinated ships. Destroy it, the render commanded. His voice was calm, but his subordinates could hear the edge in it. They had never heard that edge before. Every weapon platform within range. Fire on that ship. Do not let it come any closer. 2,000 weapons turned toward the space around the human vessel became a storm of death. Energy beams crossed and recrossed, creating a net of light that should have caught anything trying to pass through. The targeting systems were working again, predicting movement, calculating trajectories, firing with perfect precision. They hit nothing. Was no longer flying like a pilot. He was flying like something else entirely, something that existed beyond normal human limits. His hands moved across the controls faster than thought. His eyes saw patterns in the chaos that no one else could see. The ship responded to him as if it were alive, as if it shared his will and his determination. Later, when the battle was analyzed by experts from a dozen species, they would calculate that had sustained forces of over 40 gravities during the approach, forces that should have killed him instantly, forces that should have turned his bones to powder and his blood to mist. He did not die. How is he doing that? Whispered, watching the tactical display with amazement. I do not know, admitted. I do not think he knows. Some things cannot be explained by science or logic. Some things just are. The twisted through the storm of weapons fire. It rolled and dove and climbed, always finding the one gap in the assault, always moving where the enemy did not expect. Beams passed within meters of the hull. Near misses scorched the armor and overloaded sensors, but nothing hit. Bora said into the communication system, "How much longer?" In the engineering section, Bora and her team were working with hands that shook from exhaustion. The resonance lance was almost complete. Cables ran across the floor like metal vines, connecting the weapon to every power source on the ship. 2 minutes, Bora reported, maybe less. We may not have 2 minutes. Then I will work faster. The render was losing control of his emotions. This was impossible. This was absolutely impossible. One small ship, piloted by a species he had considered barely worth cataloging, was making his entire fleet look like fools. All ships in range, concentrate fire, he ordered. I do not care about coordination. I do not care about patterns. Fill the space around that vessel with so much energy that nothing can survive. 500 ships opened fire at once. The attack was crude and wasteful, more anger than tactics, but it was also overwhelming. There was simply too much firepower for any single vessel to avoid. The took its first direct hit. The impact threw from her chair. Warning lights exploded across every console. Somewhere in the ship, metal screamed as it tore apart. "Damage report," shouted, pulling herself back to her feet. Was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, but his hands were already flying across his console. "Port side armor is breached. Decks 4 through 6 are open to space. We have lost." He paused, his face going pale. "We have lost 7 crew members. 7 more names to add to the list. 7 more people who would never go home." "Can we still reach the target?" asked. "Yes, but Captain, we cannot take many more hits like that." Said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the viewport, watching the chaos ahead, calculating angles and distances in some part of his mind that had stopped being entirely human. His hands moved again, and the danced sideways, avoiding another barrage. "I can get us there," said. His voice was strange, distant, as if he were speaking from very far away. "Trust me." Did. The continued its impossible approach. It took 2 more glancing hits, each one killing systems and crew members. But it kept moving. It kept flying. It refused to stop. And then suddenly they were there. They emerged from the storm of weapons fire directly beneath the Render's flagship. It was a massive vessel, the largest ship in the fleet, designed to inspire terror in anyone who saw it. Its shadow could cover cities. Its weapons could crack planets. But it had a weakness. A small gap between its shield generators, barely visible, where a sufficiently precise weapon could strike the hull directly. Had found that gap months ago, studying captured schematics. He had never told anyone except. He had never believed they would actually have a chance to use the information. "We are in position," announced. "The target is directly above us." Opened a channel to engineering. "Bora, is the weapon ready?" A pause, then Bora's voice came through, exhausted but triumphant. "The resonance lance is ready, Captain, on your command." Looked around her bridge one last time. At who had spent years preparing for this moment. At who had flown them through the impossible. At who had kept their communications working through everything. At the others, whose names she would carry in her heart forever. "Fire," she said. Every light on the went out. Every system failed. The ship went silent and still, drifting in the darkness beneath the enemy flagship. But the lance fired. A beam of energy unlike anything the universe had ever seen shot upward from the. It was not bright. It was not impressive to look at. It was a thin line of light, almost invisible, carrying a frequency that had been calculated with perfect precision. The beam struck the Render's flagship. For a moment, nothing happened. The crew on the flagship did not even notice the impact. Their sensors reported no damage. Their shields reported no strain. Then the hull began to vibrate. It started small, a tremor in the floor, a hum in the walls. They on the bridge looked at each other in confusion. Nothing in their experience explained what was happening. The vibration grew stronger. The hum became a groan. The groan became a scream. The metal of the flagship was resonating with the frequency of the lance, vibrating at a rate that its molecular structure could not withstand. The Render realized what was happening. For the first time in 11,000 years, he felt true terror. "Stop it," he commanded. "Someone stop this." No one could stop it. No one could do anything except watch as the flagship of the Dominion tore itself apart. The ship shattered. It did not explode. It broke into pieces like a glass sculpture dropped on stone. Huge sections of hull tumbled away into space. Internal compartments opened to the void. The Render and his entire command staff died in seconds, exposed to the cold emptiness between stars. The flagship that had overseen the conquest of 17 galaxies was gone. The tactical display on the was dark, but had managed to rig a small backup power supply to the communications system. Through the static, they could hear the fleet. The enemy ships were screaming. Not literally, of course, but their transmissions were filled with panic and confusion. The death of the render, the destruction of the flagship, had broken something in them. For 11,000 years, they had believed themselves invincible. Now, suddenly, they did not know what to believe. Ships began to retreat, not in formation, not in order. They fled in every direction, desperate to escape the battlefield where the impossible had happened. In the darkness of this bridge, the crew listened to their enemies run away. "We did it," whispered. His voice was filled with wonder. "We actually did it." "We did," agreed. She was smiling, though tears ran down her face. "We made them remember us." The ship was dark and powerless. They were drifting in space, surrounded by debris, with no way to move or communicate properly. They might die before anyone found them. But they had won. Against all odds, against all logic, against everything the universe had said was possible, they had won. And somewhere out there, the survivors of humanity would hear about this. The enslaved species of 17 galaxies would hear about this. Everyone would hear about this. They could be killed. A single human ship had proved it. The impossible had become possible. And the universe would never be the same. They drifted in darkness for 3 weeks. The crew survived on emergency rations and recycled air. They huddled together in the sections of the ship that still held atmosphere, sharing warmth and stories and the quiet pride of people who had done the impossible. Bora worked constantly, trying to coax some power from the dead reactor. Calculated their drift trajectory, hoping they would pass near some ship, some station, some chance of rescue. Slept more than anyone, his body finally paying the price for what he had done during the battle. Stayed awake as much as she could, watching over her crew, making sure everyone had enough food and water, keeping their spirits up when hope seemed far away. On the 18th day, managed to get a weak signal from her jury-rigged communication system. "Captain," she said, her voice hoarse from dehydration, "I am receiving a transmission." Moved to her side. "From who?" Listened for a moment, then smiled. It was the first real smile had seen from anyone in days. "From everyone." The message had spread. In the chaos after the render's death, when the fleet was fleeing in panic, some of their communication relays had been left unguarded. Final transmission from the, sent just before the ship lost power, had bounced through those relays. It had traveled across the Milky Way. It had reached the other conquered galaxies. It had reached everyone. They can be killed. A single human ship proved it. Rise. And they did. The first rebellion started within days of the message. Small at first, just isolated incidents on distant planets. But they grew. Species that had been slaves for thousands of years suddenly remembered what it felt like to fight back. Worlds that had given up hope found that hope again. The leaderless and afraid could not stop it. They tried. They sent fleets to crush the uprisings, but their fleets were no longer coordinated. Their commanders were no longer certain. The species that had ruled through fear discovered that fear could turn against them. On the 21st day, a salvage ship from the human colony on Titan found the captain and her 17 surviving crew members were brought aboard the salvage ship and given food, water, and medical care. They were weak and exhausted and damaged in ways that would take years to heal. But they were alive. Word of their rescue spread quickly. Within hours, every remaining human colony knew that the crew of the had survived. Within days, representatives of a dozen alien species were requesting permission to meet them. The first to arrive were the had been slaves of the for 9,000 years. They were tall, thin beings with skin the color of moonlight and eyes that seemed to hold ancient sorrow. Their entire civilization had been reduced to serving the Dominion. Their culture had been erased. Their history had been forbidden. But they remembered. In secret, in whispers, in songs passed from generation to generation, they remembered who they had been. Now they were free. The ambassador came aboard the rescue station where and her crew were recovering. He was old by standards and he moved slowly. But when he saw, he dropped to his knees. "Please stand," said, uncomfortable with the gesture. "You do not need to kneel to me." "You do not understand," the ambassador replied. His voice was thick with emotion. "For 9,000 years my people believed that resistance was impossible. We believed that the could not be defeated. We believed that our chains were forever." He looked up with tears in his ancient eyes. "You proved us wrong. You gave us hope when hope was dead. How can we not kneel to that?" Did not know what to say. She had never wanted to be a symbol or a legend. She had just been a captain doing her duty, leading her crew in a fight that seemed hopeless. It was who spoke, standing beside her with his arm still in a sling from the battle. "We did not do this to become legends," he said. "We did it because we had no other choice. We fought because fighting was the only thing left." The ambassador rose slowly to his feet. "That is exactly why you became legends," he said. "You chose to fight when fighting seemed meaningless. You found hope when hope was gone. That is not just courage. That is something new in the universe." The war against the remnants lasted 30 years. It was a long and bloody conflict, fought across 17 galaxies. The Dominion did not fall easily. They had been building their empire for 11,000 years, and even without their supreme commander, they had resources and weapons and the desperate fury of a species facing extinction. But they were no longer invincible. Everyone knew that now. The story of the had spread to every corner of the universe, translated into 1,000 languages, told around fires on worlds that had never heard of Earth. Humanity led the coalition not through strength, but through that same stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. When things seemed hopeless, it was human commanders who found ways to keep fighting. When battles seemed lost, it was human soldiers who, and pushed back. Became the most famous pilot in the galaxy. He trained a new generation of fighters, teaching them the skills that had carried him through the impossible approach to the Render's flagship. He never fully explained how he had done what he did. He said he did not fully understand it himself. Some things were beyond explanation. Bora rebuilt the human fleet from nothing. She designed new ships, new weapons, new shields. She took the principles behind the resonance lance and created an entire arsenal of weapons that could hurt the. By the end of the war, she was an admiral, commanding the largest fleet humanity had ever built. Became a teacher. He traveled from world to world, sharing the tactical knowledge he had gathered over his years of study. He taught alien species how to fight the. He taught them how to think like humans. He told them that victory was possible if you were willing to look for weakness where others saw only strength. Became the voice of the coalition. Her message from that simple declaration that the could be killed, became the rallying cry of 100 rebellions. She spent the rest of her life sending messages of hope to worlds that were still fighting, reminding them that they were not alone. And watched. She attended the ceremonies and accepted the honors and smiled when people called her a hero. But she never forgot the 47 who had crewed the when the battle began. She never forgot the 30 who had died during that impossible charge. She carried their names with her everywhere she went. When the last stronghold fell, 30 years after the Battle of Saul, it was Admiral Bora who accepted their surrender. Stood beside her, old now, her hair gray and her face lined with years of hard living. "We won," Bora said quietly, watching the commanders lay down their weapons. "We did," agreed, "though it does not feel the way I thought it would." "What do you mean?" Was silent for a long moment. "I thought that when this day came I would feel triumph, joy, victory, but all I feel is tired and sad for everyone we lost along the way." Bora took her hand. "That is why you were always the right person to lead us, Captain. You never forgot the cost." The universe changed after the fall of the. Species that had been enemies became allies. Worlds that had been destroyed began to rebuild. A new order emerged, one based not on fear and domination but on cooperation and shared purpose. Humanity played a special role in this new order, not because they were the strongest but because they had done what everyone said was impossible. They had stood against the darkness and refused to be erased. Monuments were built, songs were written, stories were told around fires on 1,000 worlds. The names of this crew became sacred, spoken with reverence by species that had never met a human. But the moment that defined everything, the moment that people would remember for to come, was simpler than any monument or song. It was Captain, standing on the bridge of a dying ship, choosing to fire one last shot. It was flying through a storm of death with nothing but skill and will. It was sending a message into the darkness with no promise that anyone would hear. It was 47 humans who decided that even if they could not win, they could make their enemies remember. They had crushed entire galaxies. They had ruled for 11,000 years. They had believed themselves eternal and invincible. One human warship rose and shattered their empire. And the universe was never the same again. In the archives of the defeated, historians would later find a final entry written by one of their surviving commanders. It read, "They did not defeat us through strength or numbers. They defeated us because they were willing to lose everything to deny us victory. We had no answer for that. We had never imagined such a thing was possible. In the end, we learned that the universe is stranger and more wonderful than we ever believed. Perhaps that is the only lesson worth learning." Perhaps it was.